Did you delete that search because you knew that you would be implicated in John O'Keefe's death if that search was found on your phone?
I did not delete that search. I never made that search at 2:23. I never would have left John O'Keefe out in the cold to die because he was my friend that I loved. He was my friend that I loved.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Truth Revealed. I'm your host, Sergio Gennaro, and today you are going to get a front row seat to witness the power of what we do as interrogators utilizing deception detection techniques and body language. Today we're going to take a look at Jennifer McCabe's last bit of testimony. At the end of the last video, I ended it saying that that would be all that we would look at. But I want to send a shout out, thank you to Brian at Let's Talk Live Podcast, LTL Media in Massachusetts. He sent me an email and requested that I look at statements from various witnesses. And one of the statements that he wanted me to look at was this last statement from Jennifer McCabe. With that being said, you're getting a front row seat to witness some of what I think is the most inflammatory testimony that we've seen so far. This is going to be very, very hard to explain away. And it's so relevant to the case that I really hope the jury was paying attention to this part. Let's look at this, and I'm really curious to see what you guys think about my breakdown on this testimony. All right, without further ado, let's jump into this. I'm going to be highlighting some stuff as we go along. I'm going to try doing this a little bit differently than I did before. What I want to mention before we get started, I want you to remember this. At 2:27 and at 6:24 a.m., we have a Google search for this right here. Now, when we look at this message, these messages have a bit of a different meaning to Jennifer McCabe. As we look at this message here, the 6:23 a.m., I'm sorry, I said message, I meant Google search. This Google search here, when she actually searched a different term, she searched how long T.I. died in CIKD. This is extremely important to us as interrogators. We are going to get some really good information from this. So I'll keep referencing back to this so you don't have to try and memorize what I have here, but this note we're going to keep jumping back to. Was there anything else on your mind that early morning hour time frame? So I've skipped some of the intro stuff that's not pertinent, but let's just jump right to where she does the Google search. She says, "Don't believe so." Here we have no use of the word I. When you have no use of I in a denial, that is no commitment. That lack of the word I here means that this is deceptive. This is a lie. Don't believe so. All right, Miss McCabe, if you wanted to know in general how long it takes for a human being to pass away because of exposure to extreme temperatures, what would you Google search? I'm going to play this for you in just a second here, but let's go through what she says first, and then we'll actually watch her say it. She says, "I'm not sure. All I recall is what the defendant asked me to Google in the morning." The relevant parts of her response here is she calls Karen Reed the defendant. And this is in reference to this time here, the Google search that happened at 2:27. And any time that she references that 2:27, she's going to qualify that by saying in the morning, because this is well rehearsed. When she is thinking about that 2:27 Google search, she's going to constantly say in the morning. That's her way of trying to displace where you're looking. Remember, she Googled the exact same message here. Haas long to die in cold. She did that twice, once at this time and once in the morning. So every time that she is asked about this, or even if her brain just goes there, then she is automatically going to say in the morning, which is redirecting you to the second time. Okay, all I recall is what the defendant, and anytime that she is referencing Karen Reed, when she's doing that 2:27, that incriminating Google search, she calls Miss Reed the defendant, asked me to Google in the morning. In the video, before we look at it, we want to pay attention to where she's looking. So you got to baseline people. Most people will look up and to the left when they're trying to recall. When they're trying to fabricate a story, it takes various different parts of the brain to fabricate. It's very different. Being creative is completely different and uses a different side of your brain than it does to simply recall a memory. When you're fabricating, when you're creating something on the spot, You're going to start by looking up and to the right, and then you're going to start to search for information that's relevant to the story that you're making. So you might look down and you'll kind of look around, and that's you searching that brain of yours. We notice that she is looking up and to the left, recalling rehearsed testimony. But let's go back and look at that question again. And this, I think this was purposeful by Mr. Jackson. If it wasn't, I'm glad he did it. He says, if you wanted to know in general how long it takes for a human being to pass away because of exposure in extreme temperatures, what would you Google search? He is not asking her to pull back a memory. He is specifically asking her to fabricate here. Put yourself in this hypothetical situation where you were asked to Google search how long it takes somebody to die. What you would expect to see if somebody hadn't rehearsed anything would be for them to start that process of fabricating. They should start by looking up and to the right and then starting to look around a little bit, because they have to generate an answer. What would I say to that? That's a good question. How would I address that? Instead, she just bam, zones in on a memory. So she could be recalling exactly what she texted, but in that moment, what she's doing is actually recalling both what she texted and then her rehearsed testimony for it. It's just a very strong indicator that her testimony is rehearsed and she is not actually answering the question the way that it was asked. So my note for that.
If you wanted to know in general how long it takes for a human being to pass away because of exposure to extreme temperatures, right? If you wanted to know the answer to that, what would you Google search? What phrase would you use?
I'm not sure. All I recall is what the defendant asked me to Google in the morning.
So my note for that is Jennifer McCabe has rehearsed statement for 2 different times of the day. One set of statements for when she's Googling at 2:27 and 6:24, and the other rehearsed statements for when she's Googling at 6:23. It seems to the common observer that the most intuitive way to lump these together would be the 6:23 and 6:24, because those are both Google searches that happened in the morning. But we want to keep in mind that we're looking inside the head of Jennifer McCabe, and she did a Google search at 2:27, and the Google search that matched that in the morning was at 6:24. Those are the 2 that are going to be linked in her mind. The 6:24 Google search and the 6:23 Google search are not linked in her mind, even though they happen one after another. So did you, in fact, use a phrase to Google search how long it takes for someone to die of extreme temperatures? That's just a yes or no question. Any witness on the stand should say, yes, I did. So she says, I did in the morning. Now we get that catchphrase, that in the morning, that qualifier. That, to us, rehearsing that statement is an indicator of guilt. We know that if she has to keep tagging that in the morning, there's a reason that she's doing that. And that's to make you look somewhere else other than that 2:27. I did in the morning at the request of your client. We got Karen Reed is being referred to in legal terms again. So as a client. And again, that is anytime that we're dealing with the 2:27 or the 6:24, her name shows up in legal terms. Did you in fact use a phrase to Google search how long it takes for someone to die of extreme temperatures? I did in the morning. So she here is recalling both when she did that at night, which is what the question is, and then she's saying in the morning. So in her mind, she has the 2:27 Google search and the 6:24 Google search. After 2.5 years of this, you don't know the phrase that you used. And then she says, there's so many lies and misconceptions on social media. Whew, that is in left field. So that is not even a response to the question, but clearly that's a rehearsed statement. And we're going to keep seeing this over and over again. There's so many lies and misconceptions on social media. That is evasion. So she's evading the question and she's trying to displace blame. Are you telling me you don't remember what Google search you put in? Now that this is where she switches from calling Karen Reed by legal terms to using her name. That tells us that this is the part that she rehearsed for that 6:23 Google search. And the reason why it's linked to the 6:23 is because when she rehearsed, when she practiced the way that she wanted to present this in court, she linked the 6:23, the initial Google search, with Karen Reed asking her to do that. So she is bringing Karen Reed into this, saying that I did that Google search because of Karen Reed. And when she does that, she has to link Karen Reed to the first Google search, because she's saying that she started this process because Karen Reed made her do that. And so she rehearsed this using the name Karen, not using client or a legal term. So now we're going to see why every single time she's referring to the 623 Google search, she uses her name, Karen. Now, what's her rehearsed statement? What did she practice? Let's find out. Karen was screaming, my hands were shaking, and she was saying, Google hypothermia. How long does it take to die in the cold? My note for the 623 Google search. And what phrase did you put into your phone? I'm just asking you to say it. And then she says, why don't you show me it? This is coaching. It's rehearsed, yes, but it's specifically coached. So you know that this wasn't Mr. Lawley who told her to say this. It wasn't anybody on the prosecution that told her to say this. It was someone in her group that was teaching her how to respond here, told her to respond like this. And I have a military background, and I went through a condensed version of SEER training, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. And this comes straight from that. One of the principles is to admit nothing, deny everything, demand proof. So she here is not going to admit anything. She is going to simply say, why don't you show me? This is admit nothing and demand proof, which means she was probably coached by somebody with military training. And we already know that Brian Higgins was in the Army and Brian Albert was in the Marines. And now this is Sergio speculation. I'm guessing that this came from Brian Albert because Brian Albert was a Marine. He would have had SEER training, but most Army members don't get SEER training. So there you go. There's some speculation, but this is a very military type of response. So you literally don't remember again. So now she's referring back to a previous lie. Every time we see again, that's an indicator in and of itself. So this is an indicator. Again, she was screaming Google hypothermia. How long does it take to die in the cold? How close is that to what she said before? She was saying Google hypothermia. How long does it take to die in the cold? Google hypothermia. How long does it take to die in the cold? That is rehearsed because there's no variance, no variation at all in what she's saying. She's just saying it verbatim, exactly how she memorized it. She memorized lines for this play. And I picked up my phone and started Googling. And you literally, to this day, right, under oath, you're saying you don't remember that phrase that you used. Is that what you're saying? Do you remember, or do you not? This is a yes or no. And so at this point, Mr. Jackson is just trying to get that yes or no and move on. Do you remember or do you not, Miss McCabe? That's a simple question. And then she starts with that phrase again. That morning, I don't remember specifically what I Googled, but I do know what you've put out to the social media. She starts out with a rehearsed evasion statement. That morning, I don't remember specifically, but then, and that's for the 227 search, which is why she qualifies it by saying that morning, which pushes the attention off of the 227 onto the 624. At that point, she realizes that's the wrong rehearsed statement for this question, and then she switches to her deflection rehearsed statement. So this is slightly different. The deflection is slightly different than evasion. So now she's actually placing blame somewhere else, which is to social media. Now she's saying that if she remembers what she Google searched, it's not because she Googled it. It's in her mind because of seeing it in social media. So she's deflecting that. How about this? Now, this question is a little premature, and I'll show you why. How about this? Haas long to die in cold. That sound familiar? And then she says, yeah, it's been everywhere. So now she's deflecting and she's utilizing the social media aspect that she just talked about. So she set herself up to be able to use this, and that's exactly what she's doing. So yeah, it's been everywhere. Why does that sound so familiar? And she knew where he was going before he asked this question, but he asked it anyway. So why does that sound so familiar? Because you've put it out in social media, and this is an ad hominem argument trying to discredit or counterattack the person who's asking the questions. Then he says, it wasn't me, I don't even have social media. And she says, oh, sorry, Turtle Boy did. So now, again, deflection, she's trying to change the subject, typical deception. And then Mr. Jackson says, Haas long to die in cold is what you put into the Google search, right? And she says, if you say so. This is an important statement for us to look at. If you say so, that is not denying it. She's not saying she didn't put it in there, but she's not just saying, yes, I did. She already said that earlier, but now she's phrasing it differently. So what does that tell us? Why is she doing that is what we want to know. And the answer is that this is childish statement. I don't know how to say that other than saying that this is a childish statement that gives us insight into her current state of mind. The knowledge of guilt combined with memories from hearing this word right here, has. This is the first time that Mr. Jackson has said that. Before, he always was asking for, what did you search? What did you search? You don't remember? How could you not remember? What did you search? Now he says it. When he says it, it causes a different reaction in her. It causes her to put up a blanket defense and shut down. That puts her right back. It forces her to relive that event, and that causes her to clam up. So a blanket defense to shut down every statement, regardless of what it is. She's overwhelmed at this point, and she feels that any answer to any question now could trick her into giving up information. So she's overwhelmed and she's nervous. That would be dangerous to her. This is where we want to get direct. This is where we want to put, as interrogators, this is where we want to start pushing. So, in my opinion, I think Mr. Jackson asked this question too soon, or he made this personal too soon, and we'll see why in a second. Her indicators of deception will be extreme at this point. So you do that, you make it emotional at the point where you're about to get direct, and you're just going to pound them with those direct accusations. And you want to hit that while they're overwhelmed, because they're going to have very little control over what comes out of their mouth. Your brain now is going to be pulling from your memories, but she's emotional. When people become emotional, they don't have good control over the editing process. And so she's going to start to pull and throw it out there, and that editing process is going to get very choppy. So he says, is there a reason that you don't want to admit to that? Great, that's a perfect accusatory statement. And she says, absolutely not, which, as if you watch my previous videos, that is a deception tag for her. We just got a solid indicator. I wrote that's a good attack question with a definitive indicator of deception. We know that the answer to this question is yes. There is a reason that she doesn't want to admit to that. And then he says, it's a simple question, right? I wish he wouldn't have gone that direction. When you hear it live, it sounds like a good follow-up question. But what it really is Mr. Jackson, I think, was searching his mind for the right question to ask. And he asked like a mild follow-up question. And she says, no reason. This is not a direct accusation. And we're back to that childish response. That no reason is very similar to if you say so. If you think of this like a curve or like a pyramid, once you get to that peak emotional response, you got to lay on the pressure and you got to keep it on. And this question gets us down. It steps her down a notch back to the question before. We don't want her to start to relax. We want to keep her in that state. Then, so say it. What Google search did you use? That's a great question, but there was an objection there that was sustained and it derailed that question. Now we get, you were seeking at some point to Google how long to die in the cold. And that, unfortunately, is the end of Mr. Jackson's attack. So he mounted an attack and it was repelled. At that point, he asks a question that allows her to tell the truth. And that is the end of this, because as soon as she allowed to tell the truth, her brain gets to relax and she doesn't have to fabricate. It takes a lot of energy and time to fabricate and to remember rehearsed statements. And now all she has to do is tell the truth. It's so easy and stress-free to just tell the truth. You were seeking at some point to Google how long to die in the cold, correct? And she says, correct. This relaxes the pressure and allows her to answer a question truthfully. This is a question we would want to ask early before we mount that attack. And I think he realizes at this point, Mr. Jackson, that he has mounted an attack and he started it, and he realizes he still has a bunch of foundational questions like timeline. But he has a lot more questions that she can answer directly and truthfully that he still has to ask and get out there. So he's gonna back off and he's gonna get these questions out of the way. Did you see this, the actual search phrase? Yes. What does that Google search say? How long to die in cold? Now, we're not going to get the same reaction that we did the first time because she's seen this now and she's had time to process that emotion. Now, you indicate that you did that. You made that search at 6:23 a.m., correct? Correct. And then you indicated that you did it again thereafter at 6:24, correct? Correct. At 6:24, you misspelled the phrase and you spelled it as follows. How long T-I die in CIKD, correct? And she says, correct. Now you claim that those two searches were at 6:23 and 6:24 a.m. respectively. She says, sure. Okay, now he has finally worked his way through those questions that he needed to get out of the way that she's allowed to answer truthfully. You indicated under direct examination that these two searches were at 6:23 and 6:24 a.m., right? And she says, I don't know if I gave exact times, but I said it was in the morning and Karen had asked me to do it. This is interesting. She says, I don't know. That's truthful. That means she's not 100% sure if it was at 6:23 and 6:24, which even if you know that you Google searched something, if I asked you 2.5 years ago, when you Google search this, was it at 6:23? Chances are you might remember that it was in the morning, but you're not going to remember specifically that it was at 6:23, except the fact that you've been shown that, with evidence. But if she's pulling from her memory here, this would be truthful. And that's pertinent to us because now we know that she does use contractions. That is something that when somebody is being deceptive for a long period of time and you're seeing these uncontracted statements over and over and over again, you want to make sure that you have a baseline, that when they're telling the truth, they do contract those. And a good example of that is when Officer Barros is on the stand. He's a police officer, and specifically when I was in the military, when I was writing a lot of reports, I wasn't allowed to contract words. I had to write them out. And I would be interested to go back and look at my speech patterns back then, but I'm sure I did exactly what he did, which is when he is just describing a regular event, he never contracts anything. His baseline is uncontracted speech. So it's interesting. There are a lot of police officers that do that. It serves two purposes. One is that it helps you to write your report correctly if you talk like that all the time. But when you uncontract something, it's more powerful. And so police are specifically taught and trained to speak authoritatively. And if you uncontract everything you say all the time, it makes what you say more authoritative. So it's interesting, and it's just good that we get, to see that Jennifer McCabe does actually contract words when she occasionally tells the truth. So I don't know if I gave exact times, but I said it was in the morning and Karen had asked me to do it. Again, it was in the morning and Karen asked me to do it. She's referring to the process of setting up for that 6:23 a.m. Google search, which causes her to use the word Karen. So she's thinking clearly here. She's remembering answering a question that she processed as being about the 2:27 text, and you see the phrase in the morning come out, but the question is about the 6 a.m. texts, specifically the 6:23 a.m. text and that process. And so you see the name Karen. Let's keep going here. You claim that you searched it because Karen was screaming at you, yelling at you, Google hypothermia, and you Googled. Now, before we look at the answer, you should probably be thinking, okay, if he is reiterating her rehearsed statement that brought her to that 6:23 time, then if and when she answers, if she references Karen Reed, she should say Karen here because he's saying that in the question. And you Googled something like, how long does it take for a person to die of hypothermia? You Google searched it at 6:23 and 6:24. Is that right? Technically, he does say 6:24, but this entire lead up is to the 6:23. And she says, again, I'm not sure about the exact times. Just Karen asked me to do it. So again, we're still right inside of her head here, which is right where we want to be. And you're aware, Ms. McCabe, that both spellings of that phrase result in the exact same search results, don't they? I'm not aware of that. That is really, really interesting. I'm going to highlight that in green. So she says, that's contracted. I'm not aware of that. No, this is a true statement. So now we have to ask why. It almost throws me off to see a true statement from her. So we don't want to ignore that. So he says, you're aware that both spellings create the exact same search results. And if she's not aware of that, it means that she didn't look at the results. So why would she not look at the results? I think I know, but let's move along. Well, you Googled them, ma'am. You looked at your phone, you Googled Haas long to die in cold and how long T-I die in C-I-K-D. You Googled them, right? I did, yes. Again, truthful, I did, yes. She doesn't really have any problem admitting to that. And they result in the exact same search results, don't they? I have no idea. Again, this is truthful. I have no idea. It's in response to the same question. So again, we got to ask why? Why does she not know the results of what she was Googling? It's because she didn't care. She was Googling it for a different reason. So my question to you is, why the two searches? Let me think about that. Okay, she was standing next to me screaming, shaking my hand. My hand was cold. I was trying to Google it. Obviously, maybe. Whatever came up first didn't make sense because I had some misspellings, so I did it again. This is a completely rehearsed statement. The only part that came out that wasn't rehearsed was obviously, maybe. These are opposite statements. Obviously, whatever came up. Maybe whatever came up. Those are opposite statements. Obviously is the opposite of maybe. And so you do not see opposite statements that come out from a memory because the memory simply presents. You might have perceived something wrong, but however you perceive it is exactly how you're going to pull that memory. So in your mind, in your memory, this is either going to be obviously or it's not obvious, in which case you would say maybe it was for this reason. But when she says obviously maybe, it means that she's making it up. And in her made up version, she wants to say obviously, but then after she says it, she realizes that doesn't fit with my story very well. So she changes it to obviously maybe. So this lots long way of saying this is an indicator of deception here. Whatever came up first didn't make sense. So this is a negative statement followed by a explanatory statement. And that means this is a lie. So now we have a second indicator that this is a lie because it had some misspellings. So now this is a neg X. Here we have another explanatory statement. We have a negative statement and then two explanatory statements. So what does this mean? It means that she started out with a rehearsed statement and then she made a mess out of it. She tried to add to her rehearsed statement. And when she did, she just made a jumble out of it. And you remember from the videos before, anytime she tries to deviate from her rehearsed statements, they just come out as word salad. It's like just a jumble. She threw herself off with this obviously maybe comment, and then she gets super sensitive about it and gives you, this is a negative with two explanatory statements. So all of that, completely fabricated. Now this is where stuff starts to get interesting. If you're still with me up to this point, this is where you get all the payoff. So how long to die in cold result in articles concerning time of exposure. And she says, we never got the chance to read it. So now she has to admit that she didn't read the articles, that she didn't even see the articles. It's not that she didn't get the chance to read it. It's that she didn't read it. And this is her excuse for not reading it, hence the word never. But that doesn't surprise me. The word never got a chance to read it. She had a chance to read it. She just didn't want to read it. But this is what's important here. This use of the word we, she does not see Karen Reed as a friend. So for her to say the word we here, this is wildly and crazily out of place. In my mind, this is just screaming there's not just deception, but there's a big problem here that needs to be looked at. My note here is that she wasn't with Karen when this happened. And you see, even Mr. Jackson picks up on this. He says, well, you're the one who's, wait, when you say we, who's we? Because it even stands out to him. So I don't think she was with Karen here. If I had any say in any of this, I would go back and review the GPS from everyone's phones. I would look at pictures, videos, and try to determine who Jennifer McCabe was actually standing next to at 6:23, 6:24 a.m. Because that is going to tell you a lot. I never would have thought to look for who she's standing next to when she's doing these text messages. But that we indicates that she's not standing next to Karen. So she's colluding. That's what I'm getting at. At this point, she is working with somebody to try and fix the mistake on her part of Googling at 2:27 in the morning how long it takes to die from exposure. Someone is standing next to her right here trying to help her cover that up. So that will show you directly who she's colluding with to fix the Haas mistake. So Mr. Jackson picks up on this use of the word we, and then she says Karen and myself. So why does she say Karen and not your client and myself? And the reason is because Karen is the name that she uses when she's thinking about that time in the morning, the story that's when Karen was there. So it's that lead up to the 6:23 Google search. And that story uses Karen, the name Karen there. When he says, who's the we, she immediately falls back on the narrative that she created. It's a memory of a rehearsed story. And she says Karen instead of saying your client. He says, when you say we, who's we? And she pulls Karen. So she's pulling directly from a rehearsed story. So why do it again? Why do it again, Miss McCabe? You have the results. Why the second search? And this, I really like this. This is interesting. I cannot answer that. And that's fairly truthful. It's very sensitive, but it's truthful. I cannot answer that because answering that would incriminate her. She says, I cannot answer that beyond telling you my rehearsed statement, which is that my hands were frozen. She was shaking me and screaming at me. So this is a truthful statement. She can't answer that because it's incriminating. This is uncontracted because it's very sensitive for her. She cannot answer that because if she does, she'll go to jail. I mean, truthfully, she can't answer it truthfully. Notice she doesn't say that she doesn't know. So she says, I can't answer that. Where she could have just said, I don't know. So why do it again? Why do it again, Miss McCabe? Could just say, I don't know. I don't know why I did it again. It looked all jumbled up. She was yelling. I didn't even look at the results. Whatever. She could have started with, I don't know, but she didn't. She said, I can't answer. And you see the time according to the Celebrite data. You see the first search that says, how long to die in the cold? I do. What's that time? Okay, now he's leading into the full-on assault, the full attack, which was he sort of stumbled into it the first time way up in the beginning, but now he's at the right point for the attack. So what time? You've got the 2:27 a.m. or p.m., Miss McCabe. You made that search at 2:27 a.m. because you knew that John O'Keefe was outside in your sister's lawn dying in the cold, didn't you? So Mr. Jackson knows what he's doing here. He re-taps that emotional vein, that emotional button. Once you start pushing that, you get back to the top of that pyramid again, and now she's going to lose control over her ability to edit, which is exactly what Mr. Jackson wants here. To get the truth, you have to break down their editing process. She says, absolutely not. I did not. So we bust out this pen here. Absolutely not. I did not make that search at that time. No. Unfortunately, there's no video. I wish I could have seen her, what she was doing when she says this. But that's two indicators right together here. And that's just a clear lie. The next morning after John was discovered at 6 a.m., that you had an incriminating search on your phone, didn't you? Absolutely not. She's responding to an incriminating search on your phone, didn't you? She says, absolutely not. Meaning, absolutely, yes, she did. In order to cover your tracks, you searched it again in order to overwrite the original 227, correct? And she says, again, absolutely not. So again, we have two indicators. She is just wildly deceptive here. She just has no ability to use rehearsed statements. She is emotional and she's broken down at this point. But you were nervous and you screwed it up. So the first search you made at 6:23 was Haas long to die in CLKD, wasn't it? And she says no. So there's a couple of things here because he said she's nervous and screwed it up. So that allows her to address this, not why she did it. And then and he says, when you see the search right there, correct? She says, I see the search, but I disagree with your narrative, meaning that she was nervous. And what is the time frame of that search? 6:23. And you agree that time frame is accurate, right? Again, it's what the report says. Okay, so again, this is the coaching. She's going back to that. Anything that references these times directly, she's not going to admit to. And that comports with your memory of that morning about 6:23 in the morning, 51 seconds, correct. There's a second search, correct? Correct. And in this one, it's 6:24 says, Haas long to die in cold, 6:24:18. And that comports with your memory as well. I remember Googling it at the request of the defendant because this is not tied to the 6:23 text. Now we have a reference back to the defendant. So we can tell which narrative she's trying to access here. But it also solidifies that these are rehearsed statements. Correct? Yes. But the reality is your first search didn't comport with the 2:27 a.m. search, did it? It was a different spelling, wasn't it? So very direct questions. He mentions the 2:27 text and she comes out with a jumble of just a mess. So these direct questions, keeping the pressure on, it makes it just impossible for her to get herself under control here. And then she says, I never search. So the wrong tense. So we have the wrong tense search. And then this is just not even a complete sentence to 2:27. And then she says this, that is not reality, whatever that means. So she's a mess. She's an absolute mess at this point. But the 6:24 search did exactly mirror the search that, according to this report, took place at 2:27, correct? She says, I'm not sure. Celebrite will be able to explain it to you. I can't. Again, she says she can't. Like, it's almost like she's saying that she wants to. At this point, I think she's so tired of all of this that this to me is an indicator as an interrogator that she is getting ready to break here. That if this was an interrogation, you could change the direction of it and break her. And of those three searches, one of them got deleted. Isn't that right? And she says, I never deleted any search. So indicator of deception, she did delete it. Take a look at the Celebrite report. Top search in the column marked deleted. What do you see? I see a yes. And so that evidence says that she clearly deleted it. Did you delete that search because you knew that you would be implicated in John O'Keefe's death if that search was found on your phone? So here we go.
Did you delete that search because you knew that you would be implicated in John O'Keefe's death if that search was found on your phone?
I did not delete that search. I never made that search at 2:23. I never would have left John O'Keefe out in the cold to die because he was my friend that I loved.
On your phone. So here we go. This is for all the chips. I did not, we have an uncontracted denial. I did not delete that search. I never made that search at 2:23. She even said the wrong time, which helps you to lie. If you change a detail, because she didn't actually make the search at 223. She made 227. But I think her mind is just a swirl at this point, and she's making mistakes with the facts as well as in her language. And she says, I never would have. So would is another way of saying never. This is kind of like I never would have left John O'Keefe out in the cold to die. I never would have is technically a negative. It's not in the right tense, but it is a negative statement tied to a explanatory statement. This is another indicator. So in this sentence, we have 4 indicators of deception. And then this is interesting because she says this a couple of times, and I don't know if this means anything or not, but she says that she loved him numerous times throughout her testimony. So she says, because he was a friend that I loved. So this would lead me to investigate further whether there was something going on between John O'Keefe and Jennifer McCabe, because I have friends and I would never describe any of them as people that I love. I mean, it's perfectly normal to say that because he was my friend. I mean, everybody understands that what she was trying to get at here, which is that, I wouldn't leave him out in the cold because he's my friend. The fact that she had to put that, he was my friend that I loved, this is what I'm getting at, is this looks truthful. She uses the word that I loved. So she's being a little too aggressive with the affection here. And it leads me to believe that there may have been something going on between them. But he's not your family, is he? And she is lost. This just absolutely wrecked her. And she didn't really hear what he said. All she heard was the tone. And she thinks she screwed up part of a rehearsed statement in here. I mean, she knows she screwed it up. And she also said that she loved John O'Keefe. And then, but he's not your family, is he? And she says, family and friends.
My friend that I loved.
But he's not your family, is he?
Family and friends.
Family and friends. I'm not actually sure what she was trying to fix or how she thought that would fix it. I think she just wants to move past this. You acknowledge that you made the search at 6:23, don't you? In the morning, I did, yes. So she just has to keep saying this. At this point, now we're getting overlap between the 6:23 and the 6:24 because of this. Her brain is a wreck at this point, and so now you're getting you acknowledge that you made the search at 6:23, don't you? In the morning. I did, yes. You acknowledge that you made the search at 6:24. Multiple times in the morning, yes. The 3 searches that showed up, they were all found on your phone. The one that you disavow is the one that took place at 2:27 a.m., which would implicate you and exonerate my client. This is not even trying to argue with the question anymore. She's tired. Of those 3 searches, there was only one marked delete. Isn't that right? Correct. Let's see. That was the 2:27 a.m., correct? I wouldn't even know how to go in and delete a search. So this is another way I wouldn't. This is another way of saying never. And at this point, Mr. Jackson's just tired of this. And he says, that's not what I asked you. The one, according to the Celebrite report that was deleted, the one at 2:27 a.m., correct? Correct. You would agree that that's awfully convenient for you. So and that's it for this statement here. Let's see. What's the overall big picture? The big picture here is that based on the deception in here, what Mr. Jackson is saying, his narrative that he has created is spot on. He just nailed it. And there was just nothing. The only parts in here where she's not lying is when she's saying, yes, I texted that, because it's on the wall, it's on their screen, but everything else is deceptive. I wouldn't forget about this, this would really help. If you can see who she's with at that time, then, that would probably help to build a case later. So this officially ends my looking at Jennifer McCabe. That is all that we need to look at with her. We've got all the information that we can get from her. The reason why I teach this and why I tell you and reiterate and show examples, not just tell you that the word never means it's a lie, but I go and I show you over and over again that, she'll say never and then she'll go back and tell you that, oh yeah, I was mistaken. I was lying there. I think that it's usually good people who get taken advantage of, and good people are more likely to just believe what they hear. So I want to teach people this so that good people have a chance against all the bad people out there. I'll just wrap this up by saying, keep seeking the truth. And this is Truth Revealed signing off.